this thing on.
It is, it's loud. So, ready to rock and roll?
Ready? Let's do this.
Hello everyone, welcome to our latest episode of Live at Daly's. I'm BC Kowalski. With me today is David Daniels, and we are both just getting done with the winter vortex that just swept over Wisconsin. Actually broke a water main in front of my house on Wednesday night. It got down to about 27 below, which is just really crazy. I mean,
it's terrible.
It's really terrible. My car barely started in the morning. Dave, I don't know about you.
Oh, we just didn't bother to start the car.
We just stayed home. Yeah.
We stayed home.
That's what I would have liked to have done. Instead, I had to go to work. So, but unfortunately, it fell in just the wrong time. So if it had fallen on Thursday, I probably could have stayed home. But Wednesday's our deadline day, and we still had to wrap up the papers. And I came, braved the cold, barely got my car started both mornings. Even it was a little touchy this morning yet.
It was still cold this morning.
Yeah, it kind of went. On Wednesday, it was more something like. Great sound effects here. This is great radio right here.
Yeah, our garage door would not open.
Really?
Yeah. The motor made a sound like that, and it sounded sick. So we had to do it manually. Who does that these days?
I don't know. Manually. Well, as always, our podcast episodes are recorded live at Daly's Restaurant on 3rd Street in downtown Wausau, right in front of the Wausau Center Mall. You've got great food and drinks. Dave and I are having a couple right now.
Cheers.
We can cheers, yeah. One of their newest things here is the new CBD infused drinks. So you can get your CBD fix right in your drink, right here at Daly's. Pretty cool.
Awesome.
So I think I mentioned my guest today is David Daniels. Do you prefer David or Dave?
You know what? I was born David. People call me Dave, David, Dino Dave.
Dino Dave.
It doesn't matter.
I think we're going to call the episode Dino Dave because
right.
People like that. Dave is the founder of Colossal Fossils Museum,
That's right.
Which is located right in the Wausau Center Mall. That's not how it got its start, right?
No. Should we do the founding story?
Let's do the founding story.
All right. I've told this story I don't know how many times, but it's still cool because as a kid, most kids love dinosaurs, and when we were young, Jurassic Park came out for the first time. Huge, craze about dinosaurs. I think I was in 3rd grade maybe at the time, and just started collecting fossils.
Let me tell you too, because that part where they're sitting in the car in the dark, and all of a sudden you hear that stomping, and you see the little shimmer on the water. Like that's just it's great.
It still gets the heart rate going a little bit.
It does.
You've seen the movie 10, 20 times, and you still have that same feeling.
What is it about T-Rex anyway? Even in did you play video games at all when you were younger?
Not a whole lot.
I had a phase where I was into them, and so one of the games that really got me into video games was Tomb Raider. And one of the most scenes that really freak you out is you're in this jungle, and all of a sudden you hear anytime the music started up, you knew you were in trouble, something bad was going to happen. All of a sudden, but it was always wolves or bears or little normal animals. All of a sudden, this giant T-Rex comes out, and your jaw just drops, your heart hits the floor. It's crazy. The T-Rex has that. It's a video game. I'm watching it on TV, and not a very good one at that time. It's probably a 22-inch or something. And this T-Rex just scared the bananas out of me.
It's the first time you've ever swore.
Did I swear? Oh, back then. I promised have a friend's daughter is going to be listening to this.
Yeah.
She loves Colossal Fossils, so I gotta be on my behavior today. But so tell me, continue the story.
Same feeling. It's the rancor of planet Earth, right? And so I was collecting fossils as a kid, and instead of toys by the time I was in 4th or 5th grade, I asked for fossils. And we'd go to the local fossil shop. And over time, that collection grew and grew and grew, and you know, by the time I was in 5th or 6th grade, I had a really neat collection. Maybe, you know, 40, 50 items, nothing bigger than, I think the biggest thing I had was a shell about this big, a squid called an ammonite. And unfortunately, you hit middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And all those things that you loved when you were a kid are no longer cool.
Yeah.
And they make fun of you.
They do.
And it's terrible.
I liked them anyway. I just
right.
hate making fun of
So
them.
I was a closet dinosaur freak.
Mhm.
And so you pack all that stuff away and you put it in the back corner of your closet and you don't touch it again.
You know, I wonder too, I get the impression from talking to kids and parents of kids nowadays that that's not really a thing anymore. Like, from what I understand, you know, you can, there's way more latitude to be a geek about things than there was when we were
I
kids.
tell that to kids all the time today. It's like, it's okay to be a nerd. Like, hey, look at me, I'm a nerd. When I'm at a school, that's one of the first things I say. You know what? I'm a nerd.
Because it seems like, you know, I'm really into sci-fi. I think you are too,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, we've talked about that. And from what I've seen, like when I talk to students nowadays, you know, for one thing, it seems like you don't have to identify with that anymore. Like, that can just be a thing that you like.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, if we were into Star Trek, oh, you're the Star Trek geek.
Right.
Like, I feel like that's not really the same
Yeah,
thing.
when we were growing up, completely different story,
completely
right?
different. Yeah, you were, you know, either you were in the jock camp or you were in the nerd camp or you were in the dirts, they called them at our school. That was like the people that, you know, got smoked and drank and got in trouble. Like, you know, they were like 12 and they already got beards. And anyway.
That was not me. So, anyways, time went on. You get through high school and you get into college, and college is great, don't get me wrong, but that is the time in your life when they tell you you're here to get a degree so that you can go out and make money. And it's at some point in that time frame where most people lose all of those childhood interests, myself included, right? Guilty. Started out in graphic design. I made it maybe a semester. I'm like, there are people who are a lot more talented than me in this classroom, and they're a lot more interested in this. So I got a degree in construction management, and then a master's in business management, and I went into management, right? And worked for some great companies. I just didn't enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually at the height of the recession, you know, 2009, 2010. It was at that point, I was down in the basement. I had lost my job at that point, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So here's Dave with a college degree and no job and feeling pretty low.
There's a lot of people in that position around that time.
Yeah, it's a terrible feeling.
And you know, the thing with that too is that it didn't, you know, it wasn't just like 2008 came and everyone lost their job. Like it just couldn't, it was kind of like an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
You know, layoffs kept happening, especially in the Midwest, which might have been different from like New York or California. No, it didn't come all at once. It kind of came in waves.
It did.
You know, I would say that it happened between 2008 and 2012, 13 before.
There was not a lot of good news out there.
There was not, no.
Yeah, it was unfortunate, but it was, I am thankful for the recession because it was during that time I spent 11 months without a job, working odd jobs here, painting someone's house, cleaning someone's window, you know, that sort of thing. And I started to think.
I was going to say, it sounded like you had time to think.
I had 11 months to think, and it's at that point when you say, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Nothing else is working right now, so come up with something new. And I was down in the basement one day looking for a can of paint, you know, paint a door or a wall or something like that, and reached up for the can of paint, and there it was, right at the camera. Now, right next to that was a cardboard box. I'm like, what is this? Put it down. It says fossils right on the top. It was one of those boxes that had moved with me 4 or 5 times since middle school.
I had some of those boxes.
Yeah, and you just don't open them. You're like, oh, it's that thing. Okay, put it in the bag.
You don't see it again until you move again.
Right. And so I open it up, and for about the next hour, hour and a half, I sat on that cold basement floor unwrapping all of those fossils. And the smell of those rocks came back, and these instant flood of memories just came, rushing through my head, and it was a beautiful moment. And it was at that point I'm like, this is a neat collection. How can we share it? And there was no thought of how can I make money off this, right? It was how can we share this? Because this should not be sitting in a basement. And again, it wasn't a grandiose collection.
Tell me about the collection. What did you have?
Seashells, coral, fossilized poop, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone has that, right?
Everyone has.
And so we get a little copper leg from some little mammal 50 million years ago. And a lot of them, maybe half of them, I found myself in Wisconsin.
Oh.
This is kind of neat. Can we talk about how people can find their own fossils, this and that? And so I talked to my wife and talked to my sister. She's the executive director at the Good News Project here in town, another nonprofit, and talked to a few people. At that point I was working at a coffee shop, Vino Latte. I was there for about a year and a half, and one of the regular customers came in. Dr. Jim was his name, brilliant man. Got into a dinosaur conversation with him one time, and turns out he was big into fossils, put it that way. He had some neat stories, and started throwing this idea around of, hey, what if we started taking fossils into schools? Interesting. And talked to a lot of people who said, you're nuts, it's never going to work.
People say that a lot.
Yeah, and people are really, really quick to say it'll never work.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to hear that our whole lives, and it's our job to prove them wrong.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that are just really, they really have a hard time seeing past the 9 to 5. Go to work for someone else, punch the clock, go home, do your standard routine, and go to bed.
And then at that point, you're 65. Finally retire, and then what? You have a couple of years left. And that's how I look at it. So we said to all those people who thought it was a crazy idea, we're going to try it anyways.
We do it anyway. Yeah.
Do it anyways. And so the very first one that we did, we were at the Leoki Art Museum. We did a program with them. There's a guy named James Gurney who wrote and illustrated the book Dinotopia, which came out when we were kids. And he had an exhibit there. So, we had a couple fossils, and we went over there and showed them off to some kids and adults, and they loved it, by golly. So we started going to retirement communities. And I still remember one woman in particular who came up after this little 1-hour program. It was a glorified show and tell. Here's a coral, here's a seashell, and they got to touch it, which was magic. There was an elderly gentleman who came up to me afterwards. He says, I'm so sick and tired of them getting the same musicians to come in and play their guitars and keyboards and always playing bingo. I said, this was great.
Awesome.
I've never seen anything like this before. And people like him, and they started throwing the fossils that they had in the back of their sock drawer. They started giving them to me. And anyways, there was this one woman in particular. She came up to me afterwards, after one of these programs, and said, I see the passion. I think it's going to work. Here's $100.
Wow.
So we bought a giant T-Rex tooth, which happens to be here. This is it, right here.
You have a T-Rex.
You have a T-Rex? We have a T-Rex. So anyways, we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, for people listening at home, by the way, the things about about as long as my arm.
This is a T-Rex tooth,
forearm.
right?
This is
It's
a
12
T-Rex.
inches long.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, it's about forearm length for those listening at home. It's big.
so that's cool. This was for a while the largest item that we had in our collection for about a year and a half.
When was this, by the way?
Oh, we started in 2011.
2011.
So within that first year, we had Mr. Tooth here. And, you know, there was a guy, I remember watching a video. He was one of the founders of Microsoft, buddies with Bill Gates. And he was bragging about the fact that he had a T-Rex skeleton in his living room. Like, why can't we?
Right.
Why is this guy so special that only he can have a T-Rex skeleton?
And then your next question is, when are you out of town? And how long will you be gone?
It's all these little things start. When you start a business like this, you don't sleep much. Because you wake up in the middle of the night and you start thinking about something like, how can we get a T-Rex? And you start looking, by golly.
Yeah, and at this point, were you minded that this would be a business? Was that, or were you still thinking it was?
So we had the nonprofit status at that point. It took a while. I had no job, so I was working odd jobs just to raise money to get the nonprofit status, and you know, selling things on eBay. You know, old collections of mine of various items, just to raise the, I think $800 or $900 at the time to get the nonprofit status. So made some sacrifices, ultimately worth it, right?
Yeah.
And so we're sitting there, and the eventual goal was to make this a full-time endeavor so that we could always be going to schools. And you know, my background is I came from a very small town in southwestern Wisconsin.
What's that town called?
Soldiers Grove.
Soldiers Grove.
America's first solar village.
A solar. Wait, is it Soldier?
America's first Soldiers Grove.
It's Soldiers Grove, but it's the first solar visit.
The first solar village. Yeah.
Interesting.
More interesting stories there some other time. We were 2.5 hours from Madison. We were like minimum 2.5 hours from any large city that had any kind of museum. When you live there, you can't go anywhere. It's really, really hard to go anywhere. And especially today where, you know, bus logistics and field trip and budgets and this and that, it's an absolute nightmare. So we started going more schools. And then we started getting grants. And our local Greenheck Foundation, B.A. and Esther Greenheck Foundation, gave us enough to buy a saber-toothed cat skeleton, who we lovingly refer to as Esther.
Esther.
Named after, you know, Esther Greenheck. And she's awesome. She was a 600-pound cat, you know, 200 pounds more than any lion alive today. She was huge. And teeth, you know, I mean, the part of the tooth that you would see was about that long right there, right?
Wow.
And just razor sharp on both edges. She was a killing machine.
You're talking about the size of my hand thereabouts.
Yeah, right.
Maybe a little longer.
Oh, you've got it 6 inches of exposed tooth.
It's actual exposed tooth, yeah.
She was massive, and she is awesome. You know, she's at our museum now, and you know, soon after that, the Community Foundation of North Central